The Cradle of Aviation Museum in Long Island, New York. On its own, a must-visit destination. But today, the museum levels up as it provides the backdrop for one of the most anticipated retro game conventions of the year, the Long Island Retro Gaming Expo. Sit back, relax, and get ready to be amazed at the sights and sounds emanating from this orgy of retro gaming bliss. Let's freaking go! Here we are at the vendor floor. Boy, let's not sleep on that sweet Sega Master System console off to the side, and of course that really cool Super Nintendo console in the box. Some other cool goodies here. Look at that Mario bonus set. More consoles, including the Power set with the Power Pad, an NES Advantage, some Funko Pops, a lot of retro goodness. There's a Game Boy in the box. You never see that. And Pac-Man. Chomp Chomp Delicious, the board game, the trading cards, the arcade marquee. I love seeing Pac-Man represented here at the show. Boxed games a go-go. Star Wars, all the Star Wars you can imagine. Some long box PS1 games, a boxed Atari, some Pong consoles. I'm telling you, it's soup to nuts. There's even Intellivision for miles. And an Atari Video Checkers. Look at that. These are the first-party panel controllers Atari sold as replacements. Look at those beautiful black and white boxes. You don't see these very often. Box Neo Geo consoles. Wow, Famicom games, imports. Sneak and Peek for the Atari 2600. I had that when I was a kid. I'm going to have to pick this one up. Lots of cool boxed Atari games here, both first and third party. And some Intellivision. You want to repair some Game Boys? This vendor's gotcha. You want some TurboGrafx cards? This vendor's gotcha. Pokemon, manuals, comic books everywhere as far as the eye can see. Really cool laminated advertising material here. Really brilliant idea. Great for framing. Gorf by CBS Video Games, a really hard Atari 2600 title to find loose, much less complete in box. Look at all the NES games. There were so many loose NES games. Some really hard to find Coleco stuff, too. Here's Where in Time is Carmen Sandiego by Konami for the NES. There's some ColecoVision goodness, Atari goodness, a Wii, all sorts of consoles here. There's our friend Riggs. Hey, Riggs. There's a ColecoVision. More ColecoVision. Lots of that at the show here. More loose games. Here we go. This is a very rare Billy Age 8 Super Mario 3 variant. I'm telling you, suitable for grading, folks. Burger Time, one of my favorites. All the Game Boy stuff you can imagine. Naughty video game alert. The venerable Commodore VIC-20, Cabbage Patch Kids, Nintendo Power, Atari carts. You getting the message yet? There's a lot of stuff at this show. There's a test PlayStation 2 that was used by software houses developing PlayStation software. It had a lot of special debugging features built in. Very hard to find. Some really cool artwork here. There was a great artist's alley at this show. This show was also a bounty for big box computer games from Origin Systems like Wing Commander and Ultima. And there was even a big box Might and Magic from New World Computing, one of the great and most underappreciated CRPGs from the era. A staple of all great retro cons is the free play arcade, and this one delivered with some real great hits. Asteroids Deluxe, Q*bert, Marvel vs. Capcom. There's Frogger, I See Frogger. Robotron, a great classic arcade title. There's Tutankhamun. That was X-Men. Cruisin' Exotica. Computer Space, the first coiner-operated arcade machine. And Pong. Next up, let's take a tour of this absolutely amazing retro computer and gaming museum inside the museum. Folks, this is just breathtaking, and I'm certainly not going to try and give you a deep dive into all the things we're going to look at in the next couple minutes, but I'll tell you what, let me know in the comments below how many unique, amazing items you recognize. And now, let's take a look at the really cool items I picked up at the show. First up is Puzzle by American Video Entertainment. It's an unlicensed Nintendo Entertainment System game. It's sort of one of those sliding block puzzles where you try to unscramble a picture by moving blocks around. I know when I was a kid, I had the real physical version of these in frames, so it was a neat little diversion for me. And it'll look great on my shelf. Next up, a really interesting item. We found a vendor with 2 boxed Atari joysticks labeled CX40, which were the more common mass-produced joysticks. But when I went to open up the boxes, sure enough, these were actually CX10 sticks. I was very excited and immediately bought both of them. Up next is the Starplex Game Selects multi-cartridge adapter for the Atari 2600. It's a really rare piece. It's the first time I've ever seen one in person, and what it allows you to do is plug into the cartridge slot on the Atari 2600 and expand the number of cartridges you can have plugged in at the same time. If you're really that lazy and you don't want to turn the system off to plug in a different cartridge, this is for you. And speaking of Atari, the next pickup was Sneak and Peek for the Atari 2600. Keep in mind, folks, Atari and the third-party game makers were really just learning how to make video games. The premise here, you would sit down with a friend on your couch, and you'd be on the honor system. One person would have to look away while you hid your character in the house, and then the other person would try to find them. It wasn't exactly a huge house. This was the Atari. I think there were 3 bedrooms in total and about 5 places to hide. But you know what? It was a fun afternoon for me and the neighbors. Up next is UWC Wrestling, an unreleased prototype game for the Nintendo Entertainment System featuring wrestlers from the World Championship Wrestling territory in the mid-1980s. Very cool game. It's actually playable and mostly finished, but again, was never released to the public. Coming up next, one of my all-time favorite games. I had this on the Commodore 64 when I was growing up as a kid. Might and Magic, one of the original role-playing games, along with classics like Ultima and Wasteland and Bard's Tale. These games defined the modern role-playing genre we have today. An amazing walk down memory lane. And if you've got children in the room, please avert their eyes. Up next is Leisure Suit Larry 5 for the IBM PC. The Leisure Suit Larry series spans several games in the early 80s. And as you might expect, Leisure Suit Larry is naughty as ever in this one. Up next is a really unique NES title, Konami's Where in Time is Carmen Sandiego. What made this interesting as a standout on anyone's shelf is the form factor of the box. You see, this game didn't just have a cartridge and a user manual, it had a cartridge and a pocket-sized encyclopedia to help you riddle your way through the clues in this educational point-and-click adventure. And finally, this convention had some really cool Artist Alley type things. This vendor had a fantastic idea. Authentic vintage video game magazine pages and advertisements laminated for display. I got a cover of Atari Age magazine and a couple of really cool advertising cutouts. These were really neat and will frame well on my wall. Well, there you have it, the Long Island Retro Gaming Expo. With so many amazing vendors, exhibits, and activities masterfully integrated against the backdrop of an already amazing aviation museum, this show is a must-see event on the Retro Convention calendar. I hope you enjoyed this video, and please like and subscribe to get notified when our next episode of Reclaiming Retro is live. Thanks for watching.